The persecution of Falun Gong refers to the campaign initiated in 1999 by the Chinese Communist Party to eliminate the spiritual practice of Falun Gong in China. It is characterized by a multifaceted propaganda campaign, a program of enforced ideological conversion and re-education, and a variety of extra-legal coercive measures such as arbitrary arrests, forced labor, and physical torture, sometimes resulting in death. Falun Gong is a Qigong discipline combining slow-moving exercises and meditation with a moral philosophy centered on the tenets of truthfulness, compassion and tolerance. It was founded by Li Hongzhi, who introduced it to the public in May 1992 in Changchun's Jilin. Following a period of meteoric growth in the 1990s, the Communist Party launched a campaign to eradicate Falun Gong on 20 July 1999. An extra-constitutional body called the 6 to 10 Office was created to lead the persecution of Falun Gong. The authorities mobilized the state media apparatus, judiciary, police, army, the education system, families and workplaces against the group. The campaign was driven by large-scale propaganda through television, newspaper, radio and internet. There are reports of systematic torture, illegal imprisonment, forced labor, organ harvesting and abusive psychiatric measures, with the apparent aim of forcing practitioners to recant their belief in Falun Gong. Foreign observers estimate that hundreds of thousands and perhaps millions of Falun Gong practitioners have been detained in re-education through labor camps, prisons and other detention facilities for refusing to renounce the spiritual practice. Former prisoners have reported that Falun Gong practitioners consistently received the longest sentences and worst treatment in labor camps, and in some facilities Falun Gong practitioners formed the substantial majority of detainees. As of 2009, at least 2,000 Falun Gong practitioners had been tortured to death in the persecution campaign. Some international observers and judicial authorities have described the campaign against Falun Gong as a genocide. In 2009, courts in Spain and Argentina indicted senior Chinese officials for genocide and crimes against humanity for their role in orchestrating the suppression of Falun Gong. In 2006, allegations emerged that a large number of Falun Gong practitioners had been killed to supply China's organ transplant industry. An initial investigation found that the source of 41,500 transplants for the 6-year period 2000 to 2005 is unexplained, and concluded that there has been and continues today to be large-scale organ seizures from unwilling Falun Gong practitioners. Ethan Gutman estimates 65,000 Falun Gong practitioners were killed for their organs from 2000 to 2008. In 2008, United Nations Special Rapporteurs reiterated their requests for the Chinese government to fully explain the allegation of taking vital organs from Falun Gong practitioners and the source of organs for the sudden increase in organ transplants that has been going on in China since the year 2000. Background: Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, is a form of spiritual Qigong practice that involves meditation, energy exercises, and a moral philosophy drawing on Buddhist tradition. The practice was first taught publicly by Li Hongzhi in northeast China in the spring of 1992. Towards the end of China's Qigong boom, Falun Gong initially enjoyed considerable official support during the early years of its development. It was promoted by the state-run Qigong Association and other government agencies. By the mid-1990s, however, Chinese authorities sought to rein in the influence of Qigong practices and enacted more stringent requirements on the country's various Qigong denominations. In 1995, authorities mandated that all Qigong groups establish Communist Party branches. The government also sought to formalize ties with Falun Gong and exercise greater control over the practice. Falun Gong resisted co-optation, and instead filed to withdraw altogether from the state-run Qigong Association. Following this severance of ties to the state, the group came under increasing criticism and surveillance from the country's security apparatus and propaganda department. Falun Gong books were banned from further publication in July 1996, and official news outlets began criticizing the group as a form of feudal superstition, whose theistic orientation was at odds with the official ideology and national agenda. Tensions continued to escalate through the late 1990s. By 1999, surveys estimated as many as 70 million people were practicing Falun Gong in China. Although some government agencies and senior officials continued expressing support for the practices, others grew increasingly wary of its size and capacity for independent organization. On the 22nd of April 1999, several dozen Falun Gong practitioners were beaten and arrested in the city of Tianjin while staging a peaceful sit-in. The practitioners were told that the arrest order came from the Ministry of Public Security, and that those arrested could be released only with the approval of Beijing authorities. On the 25th of April, upwards of 10,000 Falun Gong practitioners assembled peacefully near the Zhongnanhai government compound in Beijing to request the release of the Tianjin practitioners and an end to the escalating harassment against them. It was Falun Gong practitioners' attempt to seek redress from the leadership by going to them in, albeit very quietly and politely, making it clear that they would not be treated so shabbily. It was the first mass demonstration at the Zhongnanhai compound in PRC history, and the largest protest in Beijing since 1989. Several Falun Gong representatives met with then-Premier Zhu Rongji, who assured them that the government was not against Falun Gong, and promised that the Tianjin practitioners would be released. The crowd outside dispersed peacefully, apparently believing that their demonstration had been a success. Securities and Politburo member Luo Gan was less conciliatory, and called on Jiang Zemin, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, to find a decisive solution to the Falun Gong problem. Statewide persecution. On the night of the 25th of April 1999, then Communist Party General Secretary Jiang Zemin issued a letter indicating his desire to see Falun Gong defeated. The letter expressed alarm at Falun Gong's popularity, particularly among Communist Party members. He reportedly called the Zhongnanhai protest the most serious political incident since the June 4 political disturbance in 1989. At a meeting of the Politburo on 7 June 1999, Jiang described Falun Gong as a grave threat to Communist Party authority, something unprecedented in the country since its founding 50 years ago, and ordered the creation of a high-level committee to get fully prepared for the work of disintegrating Falun Gong. Rumors of an impending crackdown began circulating throughout China, prompting demonstrations and petitions. The government publicly denied the reports, calling them completely baseless, and offering assurances that it had never banned Qigong activities. Just after midnight on 20 July 1999, public security officers seized hundreds of Falun Gong practitioners from their homes in cities across China. Estimates on the number of arrests vary from several hundred to over 5,600. A Hong Kong newspaper reported that 50,000 individuals were detained in the first week of the crackdown. 4 Falun Gong coordinators in Beijing were arrested and quickly tried on charges of leaking state secrets. The Public Security Bureau ordered churches, temples, mosques, newspapers, media, courts and police to suppress Falun Gong. 3 days of massive demonstrations by practitioners in some 30 cities followed. In Beijing and other cities, protesters were detained in sports stadiums. Editorials in state-run newspapers urged people to give up Falun Gong practice, and Communist Party members in particular were reminded that they were atheists and must not allow themselves to become superstitious by continuing to practice Falun Gong. Li Hongzhi responded with her brief statement of mine on the 22nd of July. Rationale: foreign observers have attempted to explain the party's rationale for banning Falun Gong as stemming from a variety of factors. These include Falun Gong's popularity, its independence from the state and refusal to toe the party line, internal power politics within the Communist Party, and Falun Gong's moral and spiritual content, which put it at odds with the party's Marxist-Leninist atheist ideology. A World Journal report suggested that certain high-level party officials wanted to crack down on the practice for years, but lacked sufficient pretext until the protest at Zhongnanhai, which they claim was partly orchestrated by Luo Gan, a longtime opponent of Falun Gong. There were also reportedly rifts in the Politburo at the time of the incident. Willy Wolap Lam writes that Jiang's campaign against Falun Gong may have been used to promote allegiance to himself. Lam quotes one party veteran as saying, "By unleashing a Mao-style movement against Falun Gong, Jiang is forcing senior cadres to pledge allegiance to his line. Jiang is held by Falun Gong to be personally responsible for the final decision." And sources cited by the Washington Post state that Jiang Zemin alone decided that Falun Gong must be eliminated, and picked what he thought was an easy target. Pearman cited reasons such as suspected personal jealousy of Li Hongzhi. Sayek postulates that party leaders' anger at Falun Gong's widespread appeal and ideological struggle. The Washington Post reported that members of the Politburo Standing Committee did not unanimously support the crackdown, and that Jiang Zemin alone decided that Falun Gong must be eliminated. The size and reach of Jiang's anti-Falun Gong campaign surpassed that of many previous mass movements. Human Rights Watch notes that the crackdown on Falun Gong reflects historical efforts by the Chinese Communist Party to eradicate religion, which the government believed was inherently subversive. Some journalists believe that Beijing's reaction exposes its authoritarian nature and its intolerance for competing loyalty. The Globe and Mail wrote, "In any group that does not come under the control of the party is a threat." Secondly, the 1989 protests may have heightened the leaders' sense of losing their grip on power, making them live in mortal fear of popular demonstrations. Craig Smith of The Wall Street Journal suggests that the government, which has by definition no view of spirituality, lacks moral credibility with which to fight an expressly spiritual foe. The party feels increasingly threatened by any belief system that challenges its ideology and has an ability to organize itself. That Falun Gong, whose belief system represented a revival of traditional Chinese religion, was being practiced by a large number of Communist Party members and members of the military, was seen as particularly disturbing to Jiang Zemin. Jiang accepts the threat of Falun Gong as an ideological one. Spiritual beliefs against militant atheism and historical materialism. He wished to purge the government and the military of such beliefs, legal and political mechanisms. 610 Office. On the 10th of June, the party established the 610 Office, a Communist Party-led security agency responsible for coordinating the elimination of Falun Gong. The office was not created with any legislation, and there are no provisions describing its precise mandate. Because of this, it is sometimes described as an extra-legal organization. Nonetheless, its tasks were to deal with central and local, party and state agencies, which were called upon to act in close coordination with that office. According to UCLA professor James Tong, the leaders of the 610 Office are able to call on top government and party officials, and draw on their institutional resources, and have personal access to the Communist Party General Secretary and the Premier. The office is headed by a high-ranking member of the Communist Party's Politburo or Politburo Standing Committee. It is closely associated with the powerful Political and Legislative Affairs Committee of the Communist Party of China. Soon after the creation of the Central 610 Office, Local branches were established at each administrative level wherever populations of Falun Gong practitioners were present, including the provincial, district, municipal, and sometimes neighborhood levels. In some instances, 610 offices have been established within large corporations and universities. The main functions of the 610 officers include coordinating anti-Falun Gong propaganda, surveillance and intelligence collection, and the punishment and re-education of Falun Gong practitioners. The office is reportedly involved in the extrajudicial sentencing, coercive re-education, torture, and sometimes death of Falun Gong practitioners. Journalist Ian Johnson, whose coverage of the crackdown on Falun Gong earned him a Pulitzer Prize, wrote that the job of the 610 office was to mobilize the country's pliant social organizations, under orders from the Public Security Bureau, churches, temples, mosques, newspapers, media, courts and police all quickly lined up behind the government's simple plan to crush Falun Gong. No measures too excessive. Official documents and circulars. Beginning in July 1999, Chinese authorities issued a number of notices and circulars prescribing measures to crack down on the Falun Gong and placing restrictions on the practice and expression of religious belief. On the 22nd of July 1999, the Ministry of Public Security released a circular forbidding the practice or propagation of Falun Gong, as well as prohibiting any attempts to petition against the ban or oppose the government's decision. In July 1999, the Ministry of Personnel issued a circular stating that all government employees were prohibited from practicing Falun Gong. Subsequent documents instructed local government departments to deal with civil servants who have practiced Falun Gong. On the 26th of July 1999, the Ministry of Public Security called for the confiscation and destruction of all publications related to Falun Gong. Falun Gong books were then shredded, burned and bulldozed for TV cameras. Millions of publications were destroyed, crushed, shredded, or incinerated for TV cameras. On the 29th of July 1999, the Beijing Judicial Bureau issued a notice forbidding lawyers from defending Falun Gong practitioners. The Ministry of Justice also issued instructions that lawyers were not to represent Falun Gong without permission. On the 30th of October 1999, the National People's Congress amended a statute to suppress heterodox religions across China. The legislation was used to retroactively legitimize the persecution of spiritual groups deemed dangerous to the state. It prohibited any large-scale public assemblies, and also prohibited religious or Qigong organizations from organizing themselves across multiple provinces or coordinating with groups overseas. The NPC decision stated, "All corners of society shall be mobilized in preventing and fighting heretical organizations' activities, and a comprehensive management system shall be put in place." The same day, the Supreme People's Court issued a judicial interpretation prescribing measures to punish individuals found in defiance of the law. On the 5th of November 1999, the Supreme People's Court issued a notice giving instructions to local courts on handling cases of people charged with crimes for organizing or using heretical organizations, particularly Falun Gong. It called for Falun Gong practitioners to be prosecuted for such offenses as instigating activities of splitting China, endangering national unity or subverting the socialist system. Human rights experts and legal observers have stated that the official directives and legal documents issued for the purge fall short of international legal standards and violate provisions in China's own constitution. Implications for the rule of law. The Ministry of Justice required that lawyers seek permission before taking on Falun Gong cases, and called on them to interpret the law in such a way as to conform to the spirit of the government's decrees. Additionally, on the 5th of November 1999, the Supreme People's Court issued a notice to all lower courts stating that it was their political duty to irresolutely impose severe punishment against groups considered heretical, especially Falun Gong. It also required the courts at all levels to handle Falun Gong cases by following the direction of the Communist Party committees, thereby ensuring that Falun Gong cases would be judged based on political considerations, rather than evidence. Brian Edelman and James Richardson wrote that the SPC notice does not comport well with a defendant's constitutional right to a defense, and it appears to assume guilt before a trial has taken place. The Communist Party's campaign against Falun Gong was a turning point in the development of China's legal system, representing a significant backward step in the development of rule of law, according to Ian Domerson. In the 1990s, the legal system was gradually becoming more professionalized, and a series of reforms in 1996–97 affirmed the principle that all punishments must be based on the rule of law. However, the campaign against Falun Gong would not have been possible if carried out within the narrow confines of China's existing criminal law. In order to persecute the group, in 1999 the judicial system reverted to being used as a political instrument, with laws being applied flexibly to advance the Communist Party's policy objectives. Edelman and Richardson write that the party and government's response to the Falun Gong movement violates citizens' right to a legal defense, freedom of religion, speech and assembly enshrined in the Constitution. The party will do whatever is necessary to crush any perceived threat to its supreme control.